Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MTG Raw Talk podcast. My name is Sakaven,
And I'm Prince.
and we're here to talk about a very special topic today. We haven't posted in a while, and that's because last month I was doing my normal complaining on the internet about how unbalanced and homogenous cEDH was, and that I wanted it to become its own format. Well, Cobblepot in a YouTube comment told me, "Oh, you can just go play Conquest." And I'm like, "What's Conquest?" So it's a new, relatively new, about 2 years old now, created by Shaper Savant. It's a multiplayer format inspired by EDH, but designed to be better for competitive balance. Now, what do we mean by competitive balance, Prince?
Well, basically, when I'm thinking of competitive, I'm thinking something that solves the whole power level issue. I don't want to sit across the table from someone who is trying to do something that is going to win in maybe 10 turns when I'm trying to do something that wins in maybe 4 turns, because that's not going to be fun, right? When I'm thinking competitive, I'm thinking, okay, we're both just trying to win as fast as possible. We're trying to stop the other person from winning. We're trying to make the most cutthroat strategy possible so that we can have the most balanced gameplay experience that we're able to provide.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty good explanation. And Conquest, as opposed to EDH and cEDH, does achieve those goals from what we've found so far. Um, to start us off, everybody is going to be aware that in EDH, the reserved list is legal. You can play with those massively expensive cards, even something like Time Twister, going for about $10,000 a copy right now, is legal in the most popular Magic format out there. So there can be a bit of a barrier to entry, especially for players like us who want to play at the highest level. There's only a limit to how long you can play with proxies and how that'll end up going if you try to be at the top of the format.
I
So,
completely agree. Yeah. And that's not so much a problem for casual play as it is for competitive play when you want to just you want to try and build something that maximizes your win percentage. And that's really hard when you're just locked out of playing certain things just because they cost too much.
yeah, even in my strangest decks, still got that null rod.
Oh,
Um,
geez, Gaia's Cradle.
yep.
There's just so many staples that unlike some staples that do exist in casual Commander and even Conquest, the reserve list card prices are just never going to come down.
They
They're
can't.
always going to be out of reach of people who don't have thousands of dollars to spend.
Yeah, they're investments. They're not really play pieces anymore. And so it's caused a lot of grief in the commander community. Now, it might be self evident, but what Conquest does to solve that problem is ban the reserve list. But not only that, other cards that have served as barriers to entry to competitive multiplayer are also banned, such as fetch lands, and cards like Mana Crypt are banned for balance reasons, but also because they are very much an investment that the creators of Conquest do not want every player to have to make.
And that's something that actually turned out to be a lot more important than it at first seemed. You don't really get an appreciation as a cEDH player for just how important fetch lands are, I feel, until you try to build decks without them. Three color decks, even two color decks, feel so different when you don't have those 10 fetches to work with. It's honestly crazy.
It's amazing just how different gameplay is without them, and I like it this way.
Yeah, there's a few adjustments you have to make. Cards that were good in fetch land formats are might be a little bit less so in fetch land less formats. A big example of this is Deathrite Shaman, which is basically just a guaranteed dork in cEDH. Not so much in this format. There are a few little things like that, but nothing major, nothing that's gonna just kill the game for you because these 10 cards are not there.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Clothis is less effective, but it's only ever that necessary after I destroy lands, so that still works. Another reason why Conquest is more financially accessible is because they've reduced the minimum deck size to 80.
Ooh, yeah, good point.
You don't need to put as much filler or as many cards in your strategy as you would have had to do in Commander. So it makes each individual deck easier to build, costs less. Um, so it's we found it as financially accessible. What we could do as cEDH players is we dropped everything we had in cEDH. We just dropped it on the table, moved some cards around, and we were playing Conquest the same day.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's it's not quite as simple as taking 20 cards out of your best cEDH list, but it's almost that simple.
It almost is.
Now, um, the second large problem that we've observed in cEDH and EDH is the gross homogenization of strategies. The pervasiveness of cards like Thassa's Oracle and um, Dockside Extortionist and Mystic Remora and Rhystic Study and of course Mana Crypt and Soul Ring also. All those cards I just listed are banned in Conquest for balance issues. Those cards offer too much advantage, and every person in those colors wants to play them.
Yeah.
So, but there's a lengthy ban list. I would say lengthy, but it's not even as long as the modern ban list. It's just a lot better than the EDH ban list for competitive balance. And another thing that Conquest does to promote diversity is allow planeswalkers as commanders. Yes, the dream that many EDH players have had for what seems like years and years is a truth in Conquest. You can use planeswalkers as commanders, which
Yeah.
gives you a lot of options you didn't have before. Now, Prince, what's another one of the rules? Will you explain the rules changes that Conquest has? Because it not only has a smaller deck size and different ban lists, but it's got a couple more rules changes to add to the tasty cake of balance.
Sure, there are two that help out combat-oriented decks, and they're very important. One of them is that your life total is no longer 40. It is now 30. So you can't just ad nauseum for your whole deck all willy-nilly. You can't just uh, take 8 off of Sylvan Library 4 turns in a row. And part of the reason is because you just don't have as much life to work with. The other half of the reason is that decks that rely on combat as their win condition are just more prominent. 30 health for all three opponents is a lot more manageable than 40 was, especially when infinite combos can't happen as consistently as they could before. And we'll talk about how the ban list affected that in some ways in a little bit. But before that, the second important combat-oriented rule in this format is the fact that commander damage that would kill you at 21 in regular commander kills you at 12 now. That means if your commander has 6 power, which is very common for legendary creatures, you can basically two-shot someone. Heck, give a double strike, you one-shot someone. Your deck that wasn't a Voltron deck is now suddenly a Voltron deck. It's that simple. If your commander has 4 power, even more common, boom, 3 hits, someone's out of the game. So this is a real thing that's, while it's not still not the most common thing in the world, it's definitely something that everyone has to keep their minds on every game. And it's actually really cool. It leads to diversity because one thing is talking about how, in theory, there are so many more options viable. But it's another thing to actually see this happen, which is why we've delayed this episode so much, is because we were out there playing Conquest, gathering data. And yeah, I can safely say I've been killed by so many different strategies out there. I've been killed by decks that land planeswalkers and then just drain the table and it's hard to answer them. I've been killed by decks that try to Voltron you out with their commander. Been killed by decks that amass a gigantic board presence and just swing out. I've been killed by infinite combos that do still exist, they're just harder to pull off. It's incredibly diverse from what I've seen so far, and these rules and the ban list are just they make all the difference in the world, to be honest.
Yeah, it feels like you're playing a whole different game. Same cards, but you need to think about things in different ways, and it's more challenging. To be honest, we have a lot of experience, and we still struggled at the beginning. I tried building my conquest decks the same way I built my cEDH decks, which was
Oh
like
yeah.
I'm gonna combo out as fast as I can, and then I got absolutely destroyed. I've been told things like, "Oh, we really hate dorks in Conquest. There's
Because
so
they're so
much
good.
removal, so much interaction. You have to be prepared for everything and the long game because any game could turn into a grind, but not like the 2 hour to 3 hour casual EDH grind. More like the one player has a primeval titan and several lands, and everyone else is trying to answer it kind of grind." And did I
Yeah.
say primeval titan? Yes.
Oh baby.
There are. We didn't keep the EDH ban list and add to it. No, we changed it. Primeval Titan's not banned. Neither is Coalition Victory.
Neither is World Fire.
Yeah, Worldfire is Worldfire.
There are very few decks that can make World Fire work, but they're out there.
Yeah, but we moving on to our next point. We say all that to say this: that there's in Conquest, there's no clear best deck. There's no tier list. There's no deck list database other than one guy who keeps surveying everyone for what decks they're playing and just adds it to one page. Moxfield's been collaborating with the Conquest community and added it as a format on their site. So if you go and build a deck list on moxfield.com, you can make it a Conquest deck and have the full rules enforcement coded into it. But because there's no tiers, there's no best deck, there's no arguments about power level in Conquest. Go to
True.
any table with any Conquest deck, it's going to be a similar play experience. It's
A small
almost
caveat.
like hmm?
Yeah, a small caveat to that is that sometimes you're just not prepared for an archetype, and you show up and it steamrolls you, uh, because you weren't expecting a certain interaction. But I haven't run into a situation where I lose to a deck, but I don't also think if I were fully prepared to beat this deck, I could easily stop it from winning every time if I so chose. Because
Yeah,
every strategy that might seem oppressive in this format at some point has the potential to also just be hated out.
yeah, it's and that is kind of what I was about to say is that matchups seem to matter a lot more than power level. It's kind of reminding me of our modern days where I go into one matchup and I just steamroll, and I go into another one and I get destroyed. I get ended. I can't even progress at all. um,
Um, Actually, it kind of leads to a dynamic where your knowledge of what every deck does and what every deck is weak to is so much more important because it lets you identify for who is the biggest threat at any given point.
yeah, to you personally, not just like the biggest threat at the table, because generic threats are also surprised less prevalent. Um, your deck has a coherent and specific strategy most of the time. There's no five color good stuff. Did we mention how hard it is to make a mana base without fetch lands?
Well, I haven't seen one, but I do remember that in an earlier interview, Shaper said he had been working on this five color Niv Mizzet control deck, which sounds sweet.
It does. I'd be interested to see that and see what color he based it off of.
Theory, if you guys can picture this, you have a bunch of gold cards, right? Gold counter spells, gold removal spell. Of course, by gold, I mean cards that are both one and another, at least one other color, so that the border, instead of being black, red, blue, white, it's gold because it's more than one color. Niv Mizzet is basically your draw engine. This is the Niv Mizzet that combos with Food Chain in cEDH.
Niv Mizzet
Not
Reborn.
Yes, yes, yes. So you would cast him. You look at what was it, six, 10, some
10
some amount of
cards.
cards top of your library. You put all the gold cards into your hand. So that solves the problem that control decks would otherwise have, which is just running out of steam by trying to control three different players. So I thought the concept was brilliant and something that would absolutely not work in cEDH when everyone is trying to just win right out from under you because the combos are just so strong.
Yeah, your commander costs 5. Get out of here. This is cEDH. But in Conquest, not the same. We
It's totally
games.
realistic for someone to try to win, get stopped, and then just run out of steam because there's no Ristic studies, there's no Mystic Remores.
Yeah, and if the audience was is like gurring at Prince here, he got the gist of Niv Mizzet's ability, but specifically it reads when he enters the battlefield, look at the top 10 cards of your library, and you may put one card of each color pair into your hand, up to one of each, and then put the rest in the bottom.
That's what I said in my brain.
Yeah, I don't know how they phrase it on the card. It's kind of a weird way to make the mechanic, but yeah, and so we've been really enjoying it so far. Another reason why I enjoy it is because I got to talk to Shaper at length, the creator of Conquest, and influential cEDH player, um, about the fact that Conquest is moderated by players who care about competitive balance, and they approach their care with rules and bans, and significant progress has been made there. They don't do the same thing as the EDH rules committee does, where they put signpost bans and they expect everyone to do self-regulation as the primary rule. Competitive players like us, we find that confusing, distracting, and it's really hard to deal with. But in Conquest, the status quo aligns with the play experience we want to achieve. But it doesn't exclude um, more casual play or creativity or deck building. You can brew something crazy and win a game with it in Conquest a lot easier than you would be able to in, I'd say, even EDH, because of how many generic staples there are that just destroy you if you're trying to do anything more interesting.
Honestly, yeah. That
There's
that that's just super super important because the one thing that's holding cEDH back, well, the two things. One is the price, which we already touched on how the reserve list helps out with that. Um, but the other is this whole issue where there are cards that are really problematic in that format, like Ad Nauseam, that just continues to dominate in every meta that Flash isn't legal in, and it doesn't get banned because it's not a problem in the type of commander games that the committee plays. So it's just not a problem for their format, even though it's technically the same one. I hope that makes sense. So, like, if you're a competitive minded player, you want to play in a format that is moderated by competitively minded people so that the ban list actually reflects the problems that you're running into, not the problems that someone who's playing under a different mentality is running into.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Prince's argument here holds up even if you acknowledge that the rules committee does gather a lot of data on various other play groups around the world. Even if they do that, cEDH or competitively minded players will be marginalized eternally as they're in an inescapable minority, and so they won't find the representation they need, especially when it's being endorsed by Wizards of the Coast, who are directly printing cards into the format.
Right.
And now with that out of the way, we're just really excited to promote Conquest on this channel. We're going to be putting out some gameplay content that we've already recorded. We're going to be doing deck techs, frequent podcasts if we can, and other more significant content down the line as well. But Prince, why don't you start us with just some stories of Conquest so far for you? What you got?
Yeah, of course. So when I first heard about this format, I saw it as a challenge. I saw it as, okay, these cEDH players, they know a lot, but I bet they missed something on the ban list, and I can expose this and figure out how to break this format. By the way, I'm a little late to this because some of the ideas I had were not banned at first and have since been banned. For example, um, Yuriko the Tiger Shadow as a commander. Not infinite, but highly oppressive in this format. It's just so brutally efficient when everyone's life total is 30. Would work great as a commander. It has since been banned. Um, what's this guy's name? The two mana Simic guy makes all your mana sources
Kinnan.
tap for one. Yeah, yeah, Kinnan, Bonder Prodigy. Would also be great in this format because every efficient infinite mana combo and outlet together have mostly been controlled. This one can kind of function as both. Yeah, it's also been banned since. But there are a lot of cards that got me thinking, ooh, Hermit Druid is legal. I can make a 5-color Kenrith Hermit Druid deck, and it's just gonna steamroll everyone. This is so fast. These guys left Diabolic Intent in this format. Limb Duel's Vault is still legal. By the way, a lot of tutors like Vampiric Tutor and Demonic Tutor are not legal, which is why I'm bringing this up.
Yeah.
Monumentally important for balance, as I've come to find out. Yeah, it just everything that works really well in theory, in when it comes down to practice, when we're playing with people that come primarily from cEDH or just happen to know a lot about Magic, they're able to sniff out what you're trying to do, and it's not as hard to stop you as it was in cEDH when you had just a ton of draw power, a ton of tutors, really fast mana, are able to just generate such consistent lines and try and win turn after turn after turn. It's really, really hard to break this format at this point. That's something I learned the hard way, but I'm glad that I tried because now I can speak to just how amazing the balance in this format feels.
Yeah, me too. I tried really hard. You know I did. And I got close because they didn't not as many pieces of good creature combo has been banned as like the blue black good X decks have been. But
Yeah,
because of the amount of removal and creature removal and counter spells and interaction and just the crazy levels of resistance I face if I'm going in balls deep into a combo, I get stopped. I can't just win every time like that. I have to
yeah,
build my deck to be able to both threaten the table at a reasonable pace and also defend itself later in the game. Another interesting fact is we mentioned Kinnan, right? Um,
yeah.
he is banned, but only as a commander. Banned as
Ah,
commander
true, true.
is a thing in Conquest because the creators give enough credit to the players of the game that they can understand what banned as commander means, and they can still use those cards in their 99. I know because
Like that.
Leovold is banned as commander, but Prince here plays him in his 99 to great effect.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can still play Kinnan in the 99 and he's going to be really good. Leovold, super annoying as a commander, but in the 99, he's still really good. I wish this could happen in Commander as well. Well, I had Wish, now I have Conquest, so I don't have to worry about what goes on in Commander. But yeah, there are some examples of cards that are just too good as commanders, but that doesn't mean you can't play them. You could, if they're still good in your deck, you can still slot them in.
Yeah. And then some other notable inclusions to the Conquest band list. Carpet of Flowers. It's too efficient. That card is really, really good for what it costs and what it does. Um, let's see. Oh, Demonic Consultation is banned. It's too easy
Yeah.
to combo off with Thassa's Oracle with it. And so they did away with
By the way,
that.
Thassa's Oracle is still a thing in this format. It's just a lot harder to win with it.
Yeah, what do you use with your Thassa's Oracle again?
Yeah, this card that's just a little bit more expensive than Demonic Consultation. It's called Leveler. It's a 5 mana creature. We have to get both of them in play at the same time. It still wins the game, but it's just harder to pull off by enough of an amount to where you don't feel cheated when you lose to it. You don't feel like you just never had a shot to stop it. You feel like, oh dang, well we just got to this part in the game where I ran out of answers and you got me. But yeah, it's a 7 mana combo now for what used to be three, at one point even two when Flash Hulk was legal in cEDH.
Yeah.
So yeah, super fixed in my opinion. By the way, when I mentioned Turbo Druid, the last thing I wanted to say about that Cannith Druid list is I did build it. It still kind of works. It's still a decent deck. Everyone has to respect it. All I was trying to say is that it doesn't have the win percentage that a really, really fast deck in cEDH otherwise would bolster against a more casual meta, which Conquest sometimes does represent. It's just that the power level difference that was huge before is no longer quite as visible.
I guess you could call it a Conquest has a power level spectrum that's a lot more narrow.
Yeah, and to not go off on that much of a tangent, I just want to throw out a little bit of an example so that we're not speaking too abstractly here. In our very first experience with Conquest, we were in a game with our friend Jobert, and he was playing a deck that is led by a commander. It's Tezzeret, the
Master the Bridge,
one of
right?
the bridge one, I think so. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And basically, as long as Conquest has been legal, I've been trying to make Soultie a thing to various degrees. I'm a bit of a more mid-range build now. I was trying to make fast combo work earlier. And coming from a cEDH mentality, you never want to spend your counter magic on something that isn't going to win the game generally or take over the game. So when Jobert's commander Tezzeret got cast, I was like, well, that's okay, because this is not going to win the game. And I'm just going to combo out, just like I'm used to in cEDH, against the casual deck that Tezzeret would be in regular commander. And then Tezzeret gets upticked, drains us for like 12, and that's when I realized mistakes had been made because
Yeah.
I had no answer to this that was clearly going to kill us. But in my mind, it wasn't infinite, so where was the threat? I didn't see it coming from a cEDH background. That's the power of this format of Conquest. Like these deck strategies that would have been miles apart in the past are suddenly on even playing field. You can beat someone down with creatures just as easily as they can combo off infinitely against you.
And we're going with the title of this video is was suggested by Shaper. Would you call Conquest the best of both worlds? Because I would.
Oh, for sure. If you're if you're a even just a marginally competitive minded person that just doesn't really like the expensiveness and cutthroatness of cEDH just because there's just not so many options. Everyone has to ramp, everyone has to do the same thing. You like the diversity of casual, but you feel like you often build things that are a little bit too powerful for your play groups. You're gonna fit in just great in Conquest. Additionally, if you are a cEDH player because you can't stand the power level problems of casual or the mentality of the group not wanting to play with certain cards that are totally legal to play with otherwise, um, you're also going to find Conquest enjoyable because everyone kind of comes in with that mentality of like, well, yeah, we're still trying to win. Everything that gets you the win is still seen as totally viable, totally acceptable. But there's also just so many more options. You don't have to either tech 50 cards against the ad nauseum archetype or play ad nauseum to win. You
Y-
can also do these 20 other completely different things. Um, one thing that I think would be cool would be to mention an archetype that either we've made that feels really unique, and maybe additionally one that we've seen that we wouldn't have thought of that also seemed pretty unique.
Oh yeah. I think I'll start this out by saying that in in episode 2 or 3, I talked about my Multani deck. my
Yeah.
mono green storm deck that just couldn't find its place. Well, guess what? Conquest is that place. I can sit there with my 6 mana tree, my commander, and a bunch of lands, and threaten the table at the same level as everyone else. It's
Yeah.
viable. It's fun to play, and it's a real threat because the lower life totals and commander damage mean that Multani is more lethal by himself, and the fact that I don't have to use creatures for mana in that deck is significant because the land ramp is fast enough for Conquest.
Yes.
Um,
Yes, that's huge.
so that deck is insanely unique. I've been wanting to play with it for a long time, ever since it got me hated out of my first casual EDH group. Um, and now I can. Like, that is my primary strategy, coming from like trying to win as fast as possible in cEDH to derping out with the hurricane. Um, so that's really cool. And another another archetype I saw that I was like, wow, that's a thing, was just mono red with Chandra Awakened Inferno as the commander. Because
Yes.
red deck wins, um, because you can't get rid of those emblems and they'll eventually kill you. And when that deck just plays a Chandra and then plays a Yokel Hops, you're just like, okay, I can't complain. I signed up
Yeah.
for this.
Shout out to Wesker who played this deck against us and actually got his first win against us. Sadly, we were unable to stop him. Uh, but yeah, who would have known? You just pack your deck full of this explosive red ramp, and you just land this big planeswalker. And if your opponents have a bunch of creatures that can pressure the Chandra, you you -3 the Chandra, wipe the board, and then start upticking. And all of a sudden, everyone's got these emblems. They're on a clock, and every time they try and play something to pressure the Chandra, it gets wiped either by the Chandra itself or by a different spell. Yeah. Oh, that deck is fantastic.
Yeah,
I
and that
totally.
was a game where I was still trying my hardest to make Selvala Explorer Returned work, which is what I view as the fastest creature combo deck you could ever build. Every time I played a dork, it was killed. I played 9 over the course of 7 turns. Every single one of them was destroyed.
That game was brutal.
It was so brutal. But then the minute I switched back to Multani, which, shout out to my wife, who was like, "You should just go back to playing Multani. I hate that deck." As soon as I did that, I played a game, and sure, like, my Stormline got stopped because my draw spell got countered. But then I sat there and I was like, I mean, I have an 8/8 with Trample, who's my
Commander
commander.
damage is at 12.
So yeah, I ended up just killing everyone with Multani because every time they destroyed him, brought him back.
Beautiful.
What about you?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I've been trying to make Soultie work from day one. I think Soultie just has so many options with the things we got over from what used to be banned in Conquest to the things that we kept. There are just so many options. As a result, it's actually kind of hard to fit in all of the right pieces that are gonna work together and not against each other. So at first I was trying to make a just a fast combo deck. Just use Tasigur as an infinite mana outlet, just make infinite mana, which is actually kind of tricky. It's not as easy as one might think, especially since Isochron Scepter is banned. A bunch of other actually that's the big offender. There are some things on the reserve list that I used to use to great effect. Um, so combo wasn't doing it for me. I kept in the ability to combo off with some cards like Defense of the Heart, which by the way is great in this format. It doesn't win super consistently because everyone has a chance to react to it. There's a fair time window there, but I mean, heck, slam it down 4 mana, you win the game if no one has an answer. That's pretty good. That's good enough to be played in mostly every green deck.
Yeah, and the hilarious thing is that when Prince plays it, it doesn't actually win the game on the spot
Yeah,
half the
sometimes it
time.
doesn't.
Um, He can with Leveler and Oracle, of course, but sometimes he
But
just goes and gets that Sylvan Primordial. Yeah, that's legal. And Primeval Titan.
yeah, Leveler and Oracle remain my one way to just win the game on the spot. That is a combo indeed that hasn't left, but it's not my primary win condition. That's my plan C. That damage used to be, if you remember in cEDH, that was your absolute last hope is to kill someone with damage. In this format, that's mostly how I win. And my mid-range deck, Soultie, who's currently being helmed by Muldrotha the Gravetide, which, by the way, is in there to be a recovery piece once everyone is at parity. It's not there to be part of the normal combo. My lines are a combination of cheap, efficient stacks like effects. We're talking Hull Breacher, Notion Thief, Ashiok Dreamrender, Leovold, Manglehorn against artifact effects, Douthie Voidwalker against graveyard effects. All these little super annoying things that you'd find in cEDH that stop people from going faster than you. And then we got the big hitters that as once we go into the mid game, start playing things like Wandering Archaic, Primeval Titan, Sylvan Primordial, I suppose, Bane of Progress. Suddenly I just get bigger and bigger and go over the top of people. And this is something that I would have thought was just a casual thing. So like, oh, that's kind of cool, but it would really only work in casual because you're just gonna get comboed out. I don't even run that much counter magic in this deck. I have maybe two or three counter spells at any given time, or at least traditional counter spells. Like you can technically counter some things with Hull Breacher and Notion Thief, but that's kind of a different topic. Um, and no, the win condition is just play big, stompy things after you've annoyed people enough to not be able to do what they were trying to do, or maybe just they were going slower than you. And it's just a strategy that would have never worked in cEDH. And the fact that it does, and it's actually competitive and it's viable, and there's a correct way to do things, and there's a perfect combination of 80 cards that I feel is still out there waiting for me to find is just such an exciting feeling at every with just a mid-range value deck after every game you just get to analyze how it went, what might have been better in certain situations, and it's just it's fantastic.
Yeah, both our deck list pages have greatly expanded since we joined Conquest.
Yeah, and I can link my list at the bottom and in the description of this video, actually. But a deck tech is incoming in the future, no doubt. As for a deck that I've seen someone else play that I really liked, um, I'll give a shout out to our good friend Beard Umbra, who has been a big help in getting us into this format and being able to explain the history of what kind of lists have unfolded, as well as what kind of things have worked in the past and why some things that appear to be working are not working. He is an aficionado of the green-white Enchantress archetype, which is another thing that seems casual. It seems like it's not fast enough to combo off in cEDH, but in Conquest, where if you remember, you don't have draw engines like Mystic Remora or Rhystic Study. All of a sudden, these Enchantress effects that whenever you play a card in your deck, you just get to draw, seem really, really good. And I didn't mention a commander for this strategy because honestly, Beard uses any of them. They're all so good. The whole meat of the Enchantress strategy is the cards, the Enchantresses themselves, the really powerful enchantments that just become even stronger when people can't combo off as easily, and especially can't combo off without creatures, because there is a card called Parallax Wave that is,
Mm-hmm.
my goodness, so efficient at getting rid of creatures.
Oh
And
yeah.
you would have never known it coming from cEDH, where everything is just spells, ad nauseum, graveyard, underworld breach, boom, Thassa's Oracle, win the game. Here, where people have to take a whole bunch of different angles to win the game, all of a sudden there are these hidden gems like Parallax Wave that can be reset in a certain number of ways that just suddenly hit you as, wow, this card is so powerful, and I had no idea it even existed.
Yeah, the amount of tilt I had facing the Chandra deck, facing Parallax Wave, facing a little known card called Mystic Reflection. Um,
Oh yeah.
I and just the prevalence of like Prince always lands a Hull Breacher or an opposition agent or an Ashiok or a Leovold or a Notion Thief, and I have to deal
Yep.
with it because I'm always trying to search and draw cards. Um, but it's just led me to believe that playing something resilient, it trumps resiliency trumps consistency on every level in this format.
I kind of have to agree. You go resiliency first, and then you try and perfect your consistency, which is the stage I think I'm at. And the last point I wanted to make about that Enchantress deck is the most beautiful thing I think about it is that there's no one card that if you can stop it, you be safe from this deck, like in cEDH, where you get rid of a food chain and suddenly you're a lot safer than you used to be, or you exile a Thassa's Oracle and you can breathe a little easier. With Enchantress style decks, especially once an Enchantress is on the battlefield, everything you do in that deck just works like a machine, like a cog in the machine. You can't just get rid of one piece and hope to have stopped the deck because everything just works so well together. And it's a beautiful archetype, and I'm glad to see it doing work in this format.
For sure. Another thing I've been really happy about is I've actually built like new decks that I wouldn't have thought of before because of this format. Um, One of them was Obun, which is the Naya 4 mana landfall commander that they released in the decidedly less powerful commander decks for Zendikar Rising. Um, Turns out that Obun does combo with Ashaya and Quirion Ranger, but in a different way. Ashaya plus Quirion Ranger allows you to get infinite landfall triggers, which triggers Obun an infinite number of times, which can make any of your creatures, which is also a land, thanks to Ashaya, infinitely big, which means that in combat, Obun can make a one-shot land creature kill. Um, that deck was really fun to build because I finally got the chance to play around with my favorite combos in all three of my colors. Didn't feel like I had to play something like Marath Pod or Stax in order to achieve that. I could play
Oh,
something like Obun, who's just decent, and I was okay.
yeah, it feels like every color at least has tools that are super potent in this format that might not have been the case in cEDH. You guys
Yeah.
remember our friend Elish Norn?
Oh,
Uh,
Elish Norn.
that card is so good in this format. If you can either cheat it out or ramp so hard that you can cast it, suddenly white doesn't seem like so bad of a color.
Speaking of which, the good 1 mana tutors um, in Demonic Tutor, well, not Demonic Tutor, sorry, Vampiric
Eric.
Tutor, Imperial Seal, but that one's on the reserve list, so obviously. Mystical Tutor and Worldly Tutor are all banned, but not Enlightened Tutor.
They let Enlightened Tutors stay, and I am super happy with that.
Me too. Like it's a lot of effort has been put in to keep this format balanced, and the same amount of effort is going to be put in the future. So if you're a player that likes to think of the long term and sees where things are going in EDH, and at the same time wants to have a better experience now, become play Conquest because it has a pretty secure future in terms of balance. It's a quickly growing community. We have players come over to the Discord server every day, converts, if you will, and you can. We'll be linking both the Discord servers, our Discord server, the Conquest Discord server, the the curated list of decks on Moxfield, each of the lists that we discuss, all in the description, as well as the rules document, which you can also find on the server. This video will be packed with resources. Kind of a shorter discussion, but I think it was shorter because there's less debate here. We're both sold on this format. I I can't believe how dramatically my viewpoint was shifted from complaining in the comment section and trying to be the change I wanted to see in Commander to realizing the change had already been made quietly. That was
Yeah.
a really happy surprise.
I too am really happy with the creators and the leadership of this format, really. For those of you who don't know, Shaper is one of the minds behind some of the most famous archetypes in cEDH. like Paradox Scepter Thrasios, Consult Scepter Thrasios. He was one of the people that was most outspoken to get flash banned. He's been around the block. Many people see him as one of the most important players in the cEDH community. So uh, the format is in really good hands with really smart people trying to manage it and make sure it stays as balanced as possible, cater to a competitive audience. Because I also don't want to make it sound like it's strictly better than Commander, because for some people, Commander is going to be where they want to be. But for anyone that's more competitively minded and just wants to find the best possible ways to win and wants a format that lets you freely express yourself while trying to go as fast and as big and as powerful as you're able to with your deck, this is definitely the place to free roam and kind of explore what the possibilities really are.
Yeah, and those are very similar to the words that Shaper used in one of our discussions, saying that a big point of, I'm paraphrasing slightly, a big point of emphasis with the gap between cEDH and Conquest is the paradox of wanting to play with extremely high powered cards and also wanting gameplay to have balance. And where Conquest comes in is it's an attempt to get those worlds to coexist.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to describe Conquest. I think it's super accurate.
Yeah. Um, to answer the question in the title of this video, yeah, we both believe that Conquest is the best of cEDH and EDH, and better than both.
Yeah, and we'd love for you to give it a try as well and join any of the, or either or both of the two Discord servers that we'll link below. And as of our plans for the future for this channel, where do you see it going?
Um, I, I see us being philosophers on the format, and we can talk about the state of the game, the state of our own decks and experiences, and eventually I want to release high quality gameplay content. That'll be really engaging and fun. It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of resources that I don't quite have yet. Working on it. But that's where I see the channel going, and I think that the Court of Asphodel. This is one of our primary ticks, but we have plenty more passions to share, and so the it could go in a number of exciting and surprising directions in the future. Um, Not even necessarily confined in Magic the Gathering. So
Yeah. So for I think for the future, for the near future, since let's see, like Sakaven mentioned, we're a little bit low on technology at the moment to start our gameplay videos, which we do intend to get to, and we're super psyched for when we do. We can basically start off with talking about archetypes and talking about what we're trying, what we've noticed are is working, and as well as getting out these resources to help other people who might be looking for a place to start off. Just knowing what's good in this format because it's not as self-evident as it may appear. Trust me.
yeah, and we're also interested in increasing the discussion, escalating it, making it more, adding people to it. We just want more discourse, more attention to be drawn to this wonderful format.
Yeah.
Because what it is it's organic, it's player driven, it's not endorsed by wizards. It doesn't have a wealthy, powerful, old rules committee behind it either. But its structure is the masterpiece made off of the footsteps of all that went before it.
Yeah.
So with that, I think we'll close out this shorter episode, and get going on more of our research. We'll have links to all the resources in the description, and we're looking to try and help this community grow. So thank you for listening.
Yeah, thanks a bunch for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.